The Pig family house stood peacefully on Muddy Puddle Lane, surrounded by cheerful neighbors. But the yellow house next door held a dark secret that would soon shatter their world. Spongebob had been their neighbor for months, always smiling and waving. The family thought he was just a harmless, funny character from the sea. Peppa and George often saw him through the window, giggling strangely. His wide grin never seemed to fade, even when no one was around. Mummy Pig found his constant cheerfulness a bit odd but charming. She often invited him over for tea and biscuits with the family. Daddy Pig enjoyed SpongeBob's silly jokes and underwater stories. He never noticed the strange glint in his neighbor's dark eyes. One rainy afternoon, SpongeBob knocked on their front door. His smile seemed wider than usual, almost stretching beyond his face. Mummy Pig welcomed him inside, offering warm tea and cookies. SpongeBob's eyes darted around the house, studying every corner and shadow. The family gathered in the living room for their usual chat. SpongeBob sat quietly, his grin becoming more unsettling by the minute. Daddy Pig excused himself to get more biscuits from the kitchen. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, then suddenly stopped completely. Minutes passed, but Daddy Pig never returned to the room. Mummy Pig called his name, but only silence answered back. SpongeBob's smile grew impossibly wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. His eyes began to glow with an eerie, unnatural light. Peppa and George huddled close to Mummy Pig, sensing danger. SpongeBob stood up slowly, his body seeming to stretch and distort. The family searched the entire house, calling for Daddy Pig. Every room was empty, as if he had simply vanished. SpongeBob followed them, his footsteps making wet, squishy sounds. His laughter echoed through the halls, cold and menacing. Mummy Pig found Daddy Pig's glasses on the kitchen floor. They were the only trace left of him in the house. SpongeBob's true form began to show through his disguise. His yellow skin turned darker, and his holes became deep black voids. The family ran to the neighbors for help, but nobody believed them. SpongeBob appeared normal to everyone else, still smiling his innocent smile. Night fell, and strange sounds came from SpongeBob's house next door. Wet, bubbling noises and muffled voices echoed through the walls. Peppa pressed her ear to the wall between the houses. She could hear Daddy Pig's voice, but it sounded distant and hollow. The next morning, SpongeBob waved cheerfully from his garden. He acted as if nothing had happened, his smile never wavering. Mummy Pig watched him through the window, tears in her eyes. She knew Daddy Pig was somewhere in that yellow house next door. SpongeBob's house remained silent during the day, but at night it pulsed. Strange lights flickered in the windows, and shadows moved behind the curtains. The family never saw Daddy Pig again, but sometimes they heard him. His voice would call to them through the walls, begging them to stay away. Peppa's house always seemed like the safest place. But nobody suspected the dark secrets of the mysterious seashell. Granny Pig arrives with the mysterious smile. In her hands, a large seashell shimmers with strange light. Peppa joyfully claps her hands, receiving gift. The seashell seems ordinary, but something about it frightens. Granny carefully puts the seashell to ear. Ocean sounds fill the room with sinister whispers and echoes. The family gathers around the amazing find. Nobody notices the red pulsating light growing stronger. Daddy Pig takes the seashell and nods. In Ocean Sounds, there's strange laughter getting louder. Mummy Pig places the seashell on shelf. Red light becomes brighter every passing minute, dangerously. George touches the seashell with little hand. Sound transforms into sinister whispers of unknown language. Night falls peacefully. Family goes to sleep. The seashell glows bright red light alone in darkness. Midnight strikes on the old clock. The seashell cracks loudly. Terrible gurgling sounds emerge. A deep crack appears with loud crunch. Red light bursts out violently, illuminating living room. From cracked seashell emerges yellow hand. Sharp claws scratch wooden floor, leaving deep grooves. Evil Spongebob climbs out completely from prison. Eyes burn with red fire, teeth became sharp fangs. Monster examines house with hungry expression. Sinister laughter echoes around, awakening terror in sleeping hearts. Peppa wakes up from strange sound. She quietly goes downstairs, not suspecting terrible danger. Evil Spongebob turns with wide smile. Red glowing eyes hypnotize little pig, depriving will to resist. Monster extends hand toward Peppa obediently. Her eyes become completely empty, smile disappears forever. Family wakes up without finding Peppa. They search entire house desperately, find only broken seashell. Evil Spongebob stands with Peppa outside. Now she's his faithful servant with empty glassy eyes. Monster looks at house planning horrors. His collection of living puppets must be filled with victims. Red eyes glow menacingly in darkness. He waits patiently to take remaining family members. The house will never be same. Seashell was only beginning of horror consuming all who approach. Peppa Pig's house always seemed like the safest place in the world. But beneath its foundation lay dark secrets that should never be uncovered. Strange sounds echoed from the basement every single night. The family heard dull thuds and mysterious scratching noises. Daddy Pig decided to investigate the source of sounds. He went down to the basement with his flashlight. Behind old dusty boxes, a hidden door was discovered. It was secured with a heavy rusty lock. Mummy Pig joined the search down below them. Together, they broke the old rusty lock completely. Behind the door opened a long, dark tunnel. The air was stale and freezing cold inside. The family slowly moved through the narrow passage. The walls were covered with strange green slime. At the tunnel's end was a small room. In the corner sat a yellow square figure. It was Spongebob, chained to the cold wall. He looked sad and completely helpless there. Spongebob begged to be freed from heavy chains. His voice sounded pitiful and very sincere. Peppa felt sorry for the imprisoned creature below. She asked her parents to help him escape. Daddy Pig broke the chains with his hammer. Spongebob was finally set completely free from captivity. Spongebob thanked the family with grateful tears. He seemed so kind and sweet and innocent. The family invited Spongebob to live upstairs with them. He gladly agreed to stay in their home. The first days, Spongebob behaved perfectly well always. He helped with chores and played with children. But gradually, something began changing inside him slowly. His smile became too unnaturally wide and strange. Spongebob never slept during the night hours anymore. He just stood there and stared at them. His laughter became increasingly more mechanical sounding each day. There was no real joy in it anymore. Peppa noticed that his eyes were glowing strangely. Red light in the complete darkness of night. Food in the house began disappearing mysteriously every morning. Spongebob was always near the refrigerator watching. Family photographs changed their facial expressions slowly over time. All smiles became sinister and evil-looking. Spongebob began whispering strange words at night hours. Nobody understood their dark and mysterious meaning. The house filled with creepy atmosphere of fear. Something was terribly wrong with everything around them. The family realized their terrible mistake too late. Spongebob no longer hid his true nature. Peppa's house always seemed like the safest place in the world. But tonight something sinister lurks behind the glowing screen. Peppa sits comfortably watching her favorite Spongebob cartoon. The familiar yellow character dances happily on screen. Suddenly, the television screen begins to flicker strangely. SpongeBob's cheerful smile slowly transforms into something terrifying. Red eyes replace the innocent blue ones. Sharp teeth emerge where gentle smile used to be. The evil SpongeBob presses against the screen from inside. Glass begins to crack under his supernatural pressure. With a horrifying crash, the monster breaks through. Evil SpongeBob emerges into Peppa's living room. Peppa screams in terror as the nightmare becomes reality. The creature towers over her with glowing red eyes. Evil Spongebob's laugh echoes through the house menacingly. His sharp teeth gleam in the dim light. Mama Pig rushes downstairs, hearing Peppa's frightened cries. She freezes, seeing the terrifying yellow monster. The evil creature turns his attention to Mama Pig. His red eyes burn with malicious intent and hunger. Papa Pig appears but immediately backs away in horror. The family huddles together against the supernatural threat. Evil Spongebob begins to grow larger and more threatening. His presence fills the entire room with darkness. The monster reaches out with twisted yellow hands. He wants to drag the family into his television world. Peppa tries to run but finds herself trapped. Evil Spongebob blocks every escape route with supernatural speed. The creature opens a portal back to the television. Dark energy swirls around the glowing screen menacingly. One by one, family members are pulled toward the portal. They cannot resist the evil Spongebob's supernatural power. Peppa watches helplessly as her parents disappear into the screen. She realizes she will be next victim. Evil Spongebob grabs Peppa with his cold yellow hands. She feels herself being dragged toward the television portal. The living room becomes empty and silent once more. Only the flickering television remains as evidence. Inside the screen, the family is trapped forever. They can only watch as evil Spongebob seeks new victims. The television turns itself on every night automatically. Evil Spongebob waits patiently for unsuspecting children. His red eyes scan through the screen constantly. The monster searches for his next innocent victims. The forest always seemed like a safe place for Peppa's walks. But today, something felt terribly wrong. Strange glowing light pierced through the trees ahead. Peppa felt an unexplainable chill in the air. Curiosity overcame caution and growing fear inside her. Peppa slowly walked toward the light source. Behind a large oak tree, a glowing portal appeared. It pulsed with an ominous blue light. Familiar sounds echoed from the portal entrance. SpongeBob's laughter and friends' voices carried through. Peppa couldn't resist the overwhelming temptation to explore. She stepped directly into the glowing portal. The world on the other side looked familiar, but something was horribly wrong with everything. SpongeBob greeted her with a wide smile, but his eyes glowed with red light. Patrick stood nearby with an empty stare. His smile was too wide and creepy. All characters moved too slowly and mechanically. Their movements seemed unnatural and disturbing. SpongeBob offered Peppa to stay forever here. His voice sounded distorted and frightening. Peppa tried to return to the portal, but it had vanished without trace behind her. The sky grew darker with each passing minute. Stars turned into evil red eyes. Houses in Bikini Bottom looked completely destroyed. Windows glowed with ominous orange light. All town residents surrounded Peppa in circle. Their faces were twisted with evil grimaces. SpongeBob began laughing with mechanical laughter sound. The echo carried throughout the entire world. Peppa realized she was trapped in nightmare. This world was opposite of the real one. She tried to run away from crowd, but wherever she ran, they followed closely. Evil versions whispered strange words to her. Peppa couldn't understand their dark meaning. The world began slowly dissolving around her completely. Reality became increasingly more distorted. SpongeBob reached out his hand toward her. His fingers were sharp like razor blades. Peppa screamed and woke up at home, but a strange blue mark remained on her hand. She looked out window toward the forest. The ominous light still flickered there. The portal waited for her return patiently. SpongeBob smiled from the forest darkness. Peppa realized it wasn't just a dream. The evil world still called her back. The Pig family house always seemed like the safest place in the world. But today, something dark was stirring within its cheerful walls. George sits alone in his room, staring at Mr. Dinosaur. A strange whisper echoes in his mind. The voice speaks softly, calling George's name repeatedly. George looks around confused, seeing no one there. Peppa enters the room, noticing George's strange behavior. George appears distant and doesn't respond to her calls. The whisper grows stronger, telling George about a beautiful lake. George's eyes become glassy and unfocused. Mummy Pig calls everyone for lunch downstairs. George moves like he's in a trance. At the dinner table, George stares blankly ahead. The family exchanges worried glances about his silence. The voice in George's head becomes clearer now. It speaks of cool, peaceful waters waiting for him. George suddenly stands up and walks toward the door. Daddy Pig asks where he's going, but George doesn't answer. Outside, George walks past Grandpa Pig's garden. Grandpa notices the boy's strange, empty expression. The whisper guides George toward the old lake. His footsteps become mechanical and purposeful. Susie Sheep and Rebecca Rabbit see George walking alone. They call out, but he doesn't hear them. George reaches the edge of the dark lake. The water reflects his pale, emotionless face. The voice becomes urgent, commanding George to enter the water. George takes his first step forward. Peppa arrives at the lake, calling George's name desperately. But George seems completely under the voice's control. The whisper promises George eternal peace beneath the waves. George's eyes turn completely black. Mummy and Daddy Pig arrive, shouting for George to stop. But the voice drowns out their calls. George takes another step into the cold water. The lake seems to pull him deeper. The family reaches the water's edge, but George continues walking. The voice has complete control now. George disappears beneath the dark surface of the lake. Only ripples remain where he once stood. The family stares in horror at the empty water. The whispers fade, leaving only eerie silence. Days later, strange sounds echo from the lake at night. Some say they hear George's voice calling others to join him. The lake remains still and dark, but locals avoid it now. They know something evil lurks beneath its surface.